styles have changed through the years. But most importantly is one thing that has not changed is my fundamental personality. I am who I am, so that has not changed at all. But what has changed is that me being a leader in my 20s, 30s, 40s are all very different because I mature with time and I can handle things even better. So to give you some, but one of the key things I do notice is, let's say from Singapore Airlines days, what's crucial is that because I was posted to work with so many different countries, I was in Frankfurt, Germany, I was in Copenhagen of Denmark, and then I was in New York, and then I was in Hong Kong. So my leadership style in Singapore Airlines at a point of time, even though the job was the same, which was to run the operations for the Singapore Airlines at the Singapore Airlines airport, but each culture was very different. In my style in Frankfurt, the Germans are more direct people, so they expect you to be very direct. So that is okay. And when I went to Copenhagen, it's a culture, the Danish culture is one whereby people like to seek, you like to seek their ideas instead of telling them that, Singapore Airlines headquarters tell you that this must be done. But because they like to be consulted, we then sit together and say, oh, we have this issue with the aircraft. What do you think? So we spend a little bit more time, but in the end, the answers come from the staff themselves. And quite often, the answers are exactly the same as what our headquarters wanted. But that works very well in the Danish setup. And then in New York, because it's America, is New York where dreams can happen, anything is possible. The pace of life and work was a lot faster. There was again another leadership style with these people. And sometimes you have to be quite tough because it's New York. And these are people, immigrants from all over the world. They're working there. You have to be a bit, tougher sometimes, more firm as a leader. So that was the style. In Hong Kong, it was a very mature station. Singapore Airlines had been there for so many years, so many flights a day, 6, 7, 8 flights a day. The people knew what they were doing. But because they were not so fluent in English, when dealing with the other companies, they sometimes would prefer that I attend instead of them. So we can, on a high level meeting where I can speak the English. So these are all the different styles. So that's Singapore Airlines. And then in Far East organization, it was different. It was very interesting because it's a family business. So in family business, it doesn't matter what. If the boss says yes, is yes, right? Because he runs the company. So that was another style. And then in my third company, which is my current company, which is the Beijing Hualien Group business, they are headquartered out of China. The Chinese culture is a little bit different. You can't be direct like the Germans. A lot of things you need to discuss, and sometimes things are last minute. So these are things that I feel that if I want to survive in this culture, I will have to be like water and to go with the flow. So these are all, I kind of, change my style through all these cultures and companies. But one thing that doesn't change is me fundamentally.
Спасибо большое. Давайте сразу перейдем к вашим кейсам. Forest Organization, вы, как написано в биографии, сделали реструктуризацию этой корпорации. Опишите, пожалуйста, ваш план действий. Вы пришли на позицию CEO этой компании, вот вам нужно сделать реструктуризацию. Какие шаги и какие результаты в итоге вы получили?
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good question. And then part of the reason also why this case was selected as a case study as well, because I joined Far East Organization as middle management, not too junior, not too senior, but somewhere in the center. So I started off as senior manager and then I became assistant director. So Harvard found that this was the interesting part because many of you one day may be changing your company from one to another, and you are in that mid-management. So it was interesting because at that point of time, because Far East Organization is the largest private developer in Singapore, run by the family. Yeah. So in the past, what they always did was to build homes, condominiums, beautiful homes, and sell them. But now, at that point of time, what Far East Organization wanted to do was to keep many of these homes and build hotels at the same time so that they can get constant cash flow every month and every year. So they were changing their model a little bit. With that, they wanted to bring in people who could run the operations to a very high service standard. That was when Far East Organization decided to choose and recruit people who had been with Singapore Airlines before, because Singapore Airlines, as you know, is a well-known airline, and they believe that to reach that high service level, they must have done all their standard operating procedures in place so that they could do it so well. So Far East wanted to be like Singapore Airlines. So a number of them and us moved over and worked. So it wasn't easy for me because firstly, I came from the aeroplane industry, aviation, right? Suddenly I'm coming into hotels and service apartment. It's something new to me. At the same time, in that industry, there were more men than girls. So I was very disadvantaged from day one. But one thing that really helped is the fact that the group CEO, the owners, they want this to happen. So what did I do with the action plan? We were supposed to improve the operations and service standards of all our hotels and service apartments. Because at that point of time in Singapore, there were many tourists coming in and many people coming to Singapore to work. So there was a need for service apartments and hotels. And the hotels and service apartments that we were running is not 5-star, it's about 3 to 4 stars. That make good money because you don't have high standards, right? But you must be clean. So I was smack in the center. So our action plan was to slowly understand the properties first, spend a lot of time training the staff, bringing them up to a certain standards, and we did a lot of surveys ourselves. We conducted surveys to find out, where the gaps are, what are people happy with, not happy with, and we did training for the staff. We changed the uniform. We did grooming, we got people to teach them makeup and hair so they look smart, they can greet. At the same time, I had one very big hurdle, which is all the hotel managers, they did not like me. So every time I went to the hotels, they were like, oh, she's here again, because they were under a lot of stress. So what I did was I spent a lot of time one-on-one with the hotel managers as well, so that, to get their buy-in. So there were certain times when I had to, at big meetings, I had to report things, about some of the complaints that these hotels have received. So before that big meeting, I will meet up with the hotel general manager first to give him a chance to have an answer, so that by the time I report, he can come in with his solution. So everyone wins in the end. So it was a long journey, but we managed to overcome it, eventually.
Спасибо большое. Дорогие друзья, если есть уточняющие вопросы по Far East Organization, вы можете в чате задать. Пока давайте пойдем к следующему кейсу. IPO, Retail Rate. Как подготовить компанию к выходу на биржу? Трудности, с которыми вы столкнулись, как вы их решали? Какой вообще у вас был план действий? Что вы делали? Опять другая сфера. Как вы адаптировались к этому? Расскажите нам.
Thank you. Christina, you asked very good questions. Yeah, everyone is. Yeah, so with this group, the BHG group, I actually joined them after Far East, and I lived in Beijing for 2 years. So that was very nice. I really enjoyed that. So during my 2 years, I was running operations for 20 over malls all around China. And these are what we call suburban malls, community malls. So these are malls located in very highly dense population. People live around there, and they will go to the shopping centers maybe 4 or 5 times a week to buy their groceries, to the bakery, or to go for yoga class, or to watch a movie. So it's not a high-end mall, but it is very friendly, and people like to go there. So whilst I was there, the group decided to set up a real estate investment trust, a REIT, in Singapore. So that's when I flew back to Singapore to head this whole IPO. And what makes this IPO unique is because this is the first Chinese-backed REIT to sponsor on the Singapore Stock Exchange main board. So it was a very big thing. And was it difficult? It was difficult because it was the first time a Chinese-backed company was setting up a REIT in Singapore. So the Singapore Stock Exchange had a lot of questions. And also, even though in Singapore and China, both are Asians, but a lot of Singaporeans do not understand the Chinese culture very much, even though we speak the same language, but the culture is different. So they had to send a lot of professionals to China to visit all the shopping malls to understand. Then they realized, oh, these are very good malls, So, and in a typical listing of an IPO, we will always need the few key people. Firstly, your financial advisor, and then a good lawyer. And of course, you have your auditors and accountants, and of course, tax advisors, and then your valuers. These are some of the key people you need to bring together, right? To put things together. So we spent a lot of time. It was a long team, and we had a lot of meetings, sometimes face to face, sometimes over Zoom, but non-stop, sometimes overnight meetings, the whole night until the next morning, 8 o'clock. That's normal to get it started. So I think most importantly, if you are ever involved in a listing, always try to make sure to get good professionals on board. Even though it means you pay a little bit more, I think it's worth it because they will help you cross the line eventually. Yeah. Yeah, I can
Окей.
add a little bit more. To make it more interesting, we list over here, but all our assets are in China. So we have 6 assets altogether, 6 shopping malls are all in China, and we're listed here. So I'm based in Singapore, and I have a small team here, just about 9 people, because the regulatory part, financing part, we need to take care in Singapore. But the running of the malls, every day we have hundreds of people in China that we assign to run the everyday malls. Yes.
Окей. Спасибо большое. Вы знаете, для большинства, для многих предпринимателей такая важная веха в развитии компании – это вывод ее на IPO. Что бы вы могли посоветовать тем, у кого стоит эта цель, что нужно сделать, к какому виду свою компанию привести, как ее трансформировать, чтобы она была готова к листингу на бирже?
Sure. So typically, to go for an IPO, I think, of course, before you go for an IPO, you want to think about which country you want to do it. Is it on the Nasdaq, right? Is it in certain countries or UK or where? You think about that first, and where and what they will expect of you. But most of the time, what they will expect, of course, it will be to be a profitable company, which is obviously, and there's room for growth to become even bigger and better. But what I realized that in more and more of this listing now, one thing that's very important increasingly, doesn't matter which exchange you decide to list on, is ESG. The ESG journey, which is environmental, social, and governance, right? This is so crucial now. Whatever business that you intend to be in, the environment part is very important. Like, for example, for us who are doing, shopping malls, energy and water, the consumption, net carbon zero, that's a big thing. Social, they will expect your company to do more things in terms of corporate social responsibility, where you give back to the poor, you give back to people who need it, right? And last but not least, G is for governance. They will want you to be transparent. You want to have more independent directors, right? You want to make sure you have internal audit, external audit, so that the investors will feel at peace. So I think that these are some of the considerations you have before you do an IPO.
Окей, спасибо большое. Теперь я хотела бы поговорить про кризис-менеджмент. Наверняка за 20 лет вашего управленческого опыта вы сталкивались с кризисными ситуациями. Приведите пример, что за ситуация это была, и как вы из нее вышли, как вы ее решили, тоже какой был план действий у вас?
Thank you. This is a very good question, and the timing is a little bit uncanny because I want to share one example in 1997 where the Silk Airlines crashed in Palembang of Indonesia. At that point of time, I had just was about to be selected to be a station manager to be sent overseas, but I was still under training in Singapore. We all that evening, it was around Christmas time. We were all partying, as a group from Singapore Airlines cabin crew division. And when we saw some news that one aircraft was missing from the radar. So we didn't think much about it because in the whole Singapore Airlines or its subsidiaries history, there had never been any incident. So we never thought it would happen to us. And when it was found out that, it had crashed that night, we straight away from the partying place, we rushed back home and we started calling all our colleagues to say, everybody, tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., we take the first emergency flight, Singapore, fly to Palembang to help. And we were calling everybody up and then we were rushing and we pack our clothes. And they said, don't pack any bright clothes because it is not a good time. Just bring darker clothes and pack more clothes because you don't know how long you're going to be there. And at that point of time, none of us was trained as a buddy in a crisis management, none. So we just said that, look, there's no time to train because it was a short flight, 2 hours. And all we were told was that, listen, be sympathetic, and, just if you're not sure, just listen more. Don't have to say anything if you're not sure. The moment we got there, we found out that those days there was no mobile phones. All the walkie-talkies were not working. A lot of things we had to scramble. So we were all split into 5 different hotels. And, as you know, that crash had no survivors, 0. It went straight into the river. The family had turned up. So we had to live with the family, take care of the family, and news was uncertain. So that was, to me, the first time ever dealing with a crisis where, at that point, we had no planning, right? The telecoms didn't work, but because the human nature, the human spirit can be so strong. So when they had a message to pass to all of us, one guy will go in the car to all 5 hotels to pass the message. Everybody this, everybody that, So it was very difficult. And because the news came up first on TV, so the next of kin could see, oh, but you say you found some body parts, but you told me there isn't. So, it was very, very difficult situation. I think, it wasn't easy, but I think Singapore Airlines as a whole, through the incident, learned a lot of things. They said, look, we may not know everything now, but we learned the hard way. We are putting everything in place now for future. Of course, unfortunately, later on, there was a Taipei crash, but by then, they had put all the information together already. So I think that's one case which I will never forget. Like I said, there's some things that can happen and you're not prepared for it, but the human spirit, and then you learn from there so that it happens again, you're more prepared. Yeah, so that was one incident I can share with you. It's and when I saw the Air India crash recently, it takes me back to 1997. I know what it's like, it's a tough one. So it also to apply into your own businesses, crisis management is the most important thing. Whatever business you are in, you must assume that it can be very bad one day. I want to share one more example with you. When I was based in New York with Singapore Airlines out of JFK Airport, what happened was during that time, it was about, I think, 2003, 2002, when the entire eastern seaboard of the USA had a blackout outage for 50 hours. We were there. And we didn't think it was going to happen. We just found out that, wait a minute, the lights have kind of gone off. What's going on? And then we realized that mobile phones were not quite working, right? And then we realized lights were not working. So all the emergency generator lights had to come on. And it was tough. And when we were driving on the roads, there were no traffic lights because there was no light. So cars were just trying to maneuver. You go first, I go first. Everybody goes slow. Like I said, the human spirit, if you want to survive, you will survive. We pull through. So that was one example. And the beautiful thing was the 19 cabin crew and pilots were in the hotel. The crew bus, the coach could not get to them because the tunnel was stuck. But what they did, you know what they did? They flagged down a van and they paid cash and said, take us to JFK Airport because we want to operate the aeroplane out. It's amazing. And because I couldn't call them, they couldn't call me, the phone lines were not working, but they showed up. And then we want to pump the petrol for the aeroplane. The auto ones couldn't work because no electricity. But luckily, our maintenance manager was very knowledgeable guy. They used hydraulic pump to suck it up, and the aircraft could be fueled. The check-in system did not work because no electricity. So we did manual check-in. So Singapore Airlines or all airlines have a backup plan. It's called manual. They will issue you handwritten boarding pass. It can be done. So everything, of course, we had a flight delay, but because we put everything together, we managed to get the flight to fly. Many airlines could not. Why? The cabin crew said, okay, I'm in a hotel, I can't get to the airport. I'm staying in the room, you know? Or some said, I can't do this, I can't do that. But for us, we feel that we have to do it because many passengers want to fly from New York to Frankfurt to Singapore, and they're going to Bali, different places. They have plans, they're paid for it already. So that was one example. So any business you are in, always tell yourself, what if one day they have no electricity, right? Or what if one day there's maybe terrorism? Or what if one day, there's a pandemic? I mean, COVID, we all know that, SARS and COVID. So you always have backup plan for situations like that. So you must make this thing called business continuity management or business continuity plan, BCM or BCP. For example, over here, we do a lot because we're a listed company and it's required. So you should always have this plan in case today staff cannot get to work. What do? Computer, it's virus, you can't get in. You use your phone for backup, right? So there are many things you want to plan. And also when you have your group chat with your staff, right? Maybe don't just use WhatsApp. Have another backup. In case one day WhatsApp is down, you have something else again. So the more of that, and it all comes to experience. And also in New York, I remembered the moment there was the intermittent, there was some electricity, I went to the ATM machine to withdraw cash because I needed cash to distribute for different things. So these are small things, but and also I was surprised in the home where I lived, there was a landline telephone. I took it out from the cupboard, the real telephone, and I used that to call Frankfurt because I needed to talk to Frankfurt downstream. So these are situations that you can't say it should never happen. It happened to a city like New York. So always be prepared. That's very, very important.
Излин, спасибо большое, что поделились этими историями. Я думаю, что для большинства из нас пример того, как вы с холодным разумом смогли преодолеть вот эти черных лебедей, даже если это касается вопросов жизни и смерти. Спасибо большое. Я вижу, что в чате пришел вопрос, он такой полегче. Давайте разбавим сейчас нашу более профессиональную дискуссию. Спрашиваю, как вы совмещаете семью и работу? Расскажите про ваш work-life balance. Как вам удается не выгорать? Какая у вас система тайм-менеджмента? Как вы все в своей личной жизни менеджерите? И как выглядит ваш день? Такой комплексный вопрос. Ответьте, на что считаете нужным.
I like this. Okay. So yeah, I always love that question. So this personal question by this person. Yeah, so I think in my younger days I was not so wise, so I did burn out. So during Far East organization days, because it's a very massive turnaround case, I burned out very badly, very badly. In Singapore Airlines, it was there was a mixture. So when I was in Copenhagen, things it was a lot better because there were only 3 to 4 flights a week with Singapore Airlines. So that was easier, not so crazy, right? But in New York, it was tough because in New York, I used to go to work by 11 a.m. and our flight only departs at 9 p.m. and I will leave the airport maybe 10:30. So I never took care of my meals. Sometimes a dinner could be 5 granola bars, those energy bars. That's my dinner. So that was a bit because of the nature of the job and the timing that it was, right? And then of course, and now, I'm running things are a little bit more stable now. So, but important thing that I look back now to have taken care of myself was obviously I should have spent more time taking care of myself. And again, I'm going back to my Far East days because that was the most burnout because of a turnaround case. So so I did have a burnout. But if I could give you advice now not to burn out, is to obviously spend more time with yourself. I know I'm jumping ahead of some of the questions, but I want to share with you one of the talks that I attended when I was at Harvard Business School. It is called Manager in the Middle. It tells you, how should you allocate your time for yourself, for your bosses, for your staff, right? And for your peers. Surprisingly, they recommend 50%, that's half of the time, for yourself. And I'm like, that's a lot. But yes, and then on your staff, not so much. Then bosses, yes, you have to spend some time with bosses and your peers. So with that, I learned one thing. So you must, no matter what, you must take time to pause and do the things that help you. So for me, sometimes I do some meditation. Sometimes I like to do my Chinese tea, drink Chinese tea. It's very slow, it slows you down. I like to watch Korean or Chinese drama on, I know you guys watch Netflix. I don't have Netflix, but on a lot of different websites, right? I watch those drama because it helps me relax a lot, right? And stuff like that. And I like to read a bit. So always make sure you do things that you enjoy. Even though it looks like you're wasting your time, but you're not wasting your time. You're allowing your body and your mind to recharge. Or even some men, they like playing games. Do that. Please do that. Do that because that makes you feel better. And one of the things that I do, and I'm not shy about it, is that I will sleep for a long time, especially over the weekend. Of course, in my younger days, I could sleep until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but now not so late, maybe 10, 11 o'clock, because we need the body to recharge. I was told someone mentioned this, and I believe it could be true. For women, especially when you're stressed and tired and all that, sleep is most important, even more important than exercise and food. Sleep. And for men, I understood that it was exercise and food. So it's different. And also, you know your body. You must make sure you are able to rest. And sometimes, I know you do overnight, you work very late and you're stressful, but try to take time out to meet up with friends. During my Far East organization days, I did not meet up with friends. Honestly, it's all about work. But now, as as I'm older, I'm more mature, I realize you can have the balance. But it is possible that at the point of your career now, maybe you have no time to meet with friends. It is possible. But maybe meet with some good friends, one or two, because it takes your mind away and you can talk to them about the stress that you have. You feel better. So my typical day is very straightforward. So I wake up at about after 8 o'clock. I try to sleep as much as I can. And then I'll have a glass of warm water. I do that now. I didn't used to, but now I do. And I will come into work and I'll have a bit of oatmeal, for breakfast. I never ate breakfast, but it's good that you asked me the question now. 2 weeks ago, I started taking breakfast because the doctor says it's good, for the stomach. Have some breakfast. And then obviously I will do work stuff. And interestingly, I like spending time with my team. I like my team very much because I hired them myself. And I like to have lunch with them, So I like to have lunch with them, we just chit chat and I let them talk, Just because I'm the boss doesn't mean I do the talking. Sometimes they will talk, I'll listen. It's quite nice to relax. And then we continue the day. Though I have meetings and different things like that. And for dinner, I would, I will, because I'm located in the town area, I will normally eat before I go home. Because by the time I get home, it's too late. And we finish work quite late, 6:30. So our work time is 9:30 to 6:30. So it's a little bit late. So I eat first and I go back. And then I have a little dog. So I'll walk him, spend time relaxing. And I will watch my drama till late. But one thing I always do, every night, I will always plan my to-do list for the next day or the next 2 days. I always. So by the time I wake up tomorrow, I never wait till tomorrow. So I know very clearly what I need to do for tomorrow. So when I wake up, it's clear. So these days I go to bed no later than 1:30. Yes, that's my typical day. I hope I answered that question. Did I answer sufficiently? Let me know if I haven't.
Да, здесь благодарят, что спасибо за такой честный, эмоциональный ответ. Я думаю, что у нас сегодня много трудоголиков, ну, поскольку это такой бич всех предпринимателей. Излин нам сейчас дала немножко морального разрешения на то, что порой можно побольше поспать, можно, там, если что, посмотреть фильмы. Это не прокрастинация, это, наоборот, поможет вам быть в будущем более продуктивными. Спасибо большое. Давайте теперь поговорим про гарвардский бизнес-кейс. Как вы думаете, почему именно вас выбрали как пример глобального лидерства? Мне кажется, это очень важный момент в подтверждении глобального уровня вашего профессионализма. Расскажите немножко подробнее об этом.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it came as a surprise because I started off being a student of the executive program, the general management program of Harvard Business School, right? So it's interesting because when I was in Far East organization, I reached a certain level, senior level, and they said, well, we can send you on an executive program. You can choose. So I know some of my previous colleagues, some chose INSEAD, some chose Stanford, right? Different ones. So I thought about it. I said, oh, Harvard, I want to go for the best. So that's Harvard. And it's an interesting program because it's a 7-month program whereby you need to fly to Harvard 2 times. Each time is about 4 weeks. So, and then it's a bit disruptive, but it's good. So that's what I did. So I went there for the program. And whilst there, or after the program, I think that the professor also realized that, oh, I had an interesting background. So, of course, my Singapore Airlines background was very interesting because I thought that would be the case study that would be written because it's about the first female in such a good airline. But no, they were interested in the Far East organization one. Why? I also wonder why. They say it's because it's in Asia. They wanted some cases from this part of the world. And secondly, it was a case of, they call a management lift out, means a relatively senior person, upper management coming in the middle of it and coming into another company and to take on. And then thirdly, is about changing organization structure and changing the whole culture, which is so difficult, which is what all of us are trying to do. And of course, the industry, hotels and service apartment, is something which is easy for people to understand and then, and is quite replicable. So what happened was the professors all flew in to Singapore, and by then I had listed out all the key people I needed them to interview, including the doorman, including the housekeeping staff and the technicians, because in the hospitality line, the most important person is not the GM, but the person on the ground, right? As you imagine, if the housekeeping staff does not do a good job, your bed sheets will be dirty. If the engineering staff does not do a good job, your light bulbs are not working. So that is hospitality. So that was done. And there were a lot of iterations, back and forth. And finally, it became a case study. So that was very interesting. And it has been taught for more than 10 years now. And very often, Harvard will invite me to join on, because I don't fly there so often. So on Zoom, and I will take questions from the students as well, and I'll share a little bit of my own experiences. So it's an interesting one, and many people after that tell me that they find that they can identify with what I was going through, and because the whole case study started talking about me coming from Malaysia, leaving my home at the age of 8, coming to Singapore to study on my own, living with different families. So that was very, very interesting. Yeah. So a lot of people felt, oh, so sad, those with children will feel, how can you do that? But that was what I went through. A lot of families took me in. I lived with different families because my parents were not here. I was very homesick. I was crying every day, and I was doing that for many years until I was 13. That was when I was old enough to then stay in a hostel. So that's a bit of that. I heard somebody say something, somebody feeling emotional. Yes, yeah. So that was that. So I think with the whole story, it is put together about someone's leadership journey, and why is it that today I do not give up easily. Because if at the age of 8 you can come to Singapore on your own and you're homesick and you don't give up, that don't give up culture is kind of in your mind. Yeah.
Супер. Спасибо большое, Излин. Сразу вдогонку к вопросу про образование. Как вы оцениваете, насколько образование в Гарварде было полезно для вашей профессиональной деятельности? Применимо оно было или нет? Так, Арсен.
Yeah. Yes, for sure, for sure. So I think I would say it on 2 levels. For my case specifically, it will be the fact that of what it had taught me, right? So, about taking care of yourself first and, communicating with staff. The other thing it had obviously taught me was obviously, how to, yeah.
Очень быстро можно приготовить.
Sorry, yeah. So, so that was that. The other thing that I had learned, I'm not sure about Kazakhstan, but in Asia, we don't know how to ask for feedback. We're like, oh, like as a boss, how do I give you feedback? What do you think of me? My leadership is how do you ask it? So we don't know how to ask it, but we wish to know. So what Harvard taught us was very simple. They said, the boss can ask the staff, what would you like me to do more of, less of, or the same? Right? So it's very simple. What would you like me to do more of, less of, or the same? So from there, you can get a sense of what kind of thing they like about you, and things like that. So I thought that was interesting. But I would think that for not for my case directly, but for certain people, I believe having done an executive program for sure, if they're going on to the next job, they would, there's a big plus. And that's why I want to say that you are doing this, this course with YESA. I think it's a fantastic thing because you add on to your credentials. That's number one. Number two, amongst the credentials is exposure to maybe speaking to people like me, and your learning is not just to textbook, but to all these. And thirdly, is your networking. That's the most important part. I think at the end of the day, the network and the whole alumni thing is the most important. So it has been a big help, without any doubt.
Супер. Спасибо большое, Излин. Очень приятно, что вы так оценили важность нашей деятельности. Хочу задать пару вопросов относительно скиллов в плане стратегии управления кросс-культурными командами, поскольку вы работали на разных континентах, в разных странах. Опишите, какие есть особенности управления людьми в разных странах, где вы работали. Какие такие культурные моменты есть?
Sure. And I think most importantly is it seems easy on theory, but in reality is actually quite difficult, which is obviously to respect the local culture. And you need to be, and some cultures are very deep. So, just knowing the language may not be good enough, but to know what is underlying, right? So it takes time. And sometimes we make mistakes, but when in doubt, the most important thing is to actually listen first and watch. And sometimes, quite often, we can say the wrong things. Even amongst us in Malaysia or Singapore, for example, we are in a very multicultural society. We have the Chinese, we have the Malay Muslims, we have the Indians, and then we have the Eurasians, and we also have many immigrants who are here. So sometimes saying the wrong thing, can offend, for example. So I think most important is to understand the culture. And I may not go into details again, but earlier on when I explained how each of the culture I dealt with during my Singapore Airlines days, and how careful I was to try to blend in. So that was one very, very key thing as well. So that is the key thing. But of course, you mustn't go all the way into the culture that you forget that you must achieve results. But quite often, the answer is that once you know how to manage that culture, you can then achieve the results. I mean, that's the most important part. Yeah.
Окей, спасибо большое. У нас сегодня присутствуют очень амбициозные предприниматели. Они часто интересуются тем, как нам, казахстанские свои компании, вывести на рынки других стран. Вот хотелось бы получить ваши советы, если хотим делать экспансию, например, на рынок Юго-Восточной Азии, поскольку вы очень хорошо знаете этот рынок. Какие есть особенности, что важно учесть, вот если бизнес из Центральной Азии хочет быть успешен там, либо на рынке Китая или на рынке США? Любые рекомендации нам будут полезны.
Sure. First of all, when you look at, Southeast Asia is a very good area to look at because it's growing, right? And a lot of young population coming up, and it's, GDP is growing. So that's a good one. But when you look at Southeast Asia, you must also understand that it is like a buffet, right? It's a buffet of food, and each country is so different from another. So, for example, some people may choose that for example, Singapore. Singapore is very high on corporate governance, very efficient, but also very expensive, right? But the market is very small, only 6 million people. So sometimes people think, okay, maybe I set up my company in Singapore first, but I don't have business here. I use it as my Southeast Asia headquarter. That's one possibility. And then you move on to Malaysia, right? Malaysia, where I'm originally from, right? Bigger population, but also to bear in mind that the political changes, today the government says this, tomorrow they can switch again, or land use rights can change. So in Malaysia, the thing to look out for will be that, yeah. So, right, there is a dish, a dish called a bread dish called roti prata in Malaysia. So it's an Indian bread. So when you cook, you're gonna keep flipping it this way. So they call it roti prata. Today yes, tomorrow cannot. Yes, cannot. So is it yes or no? So you must be prepared for that. So unless you join venture with a very strong local partner, even then, there are certain guidelines. Certain lands and businesses must be owned by what they call Bumi Putra, which means the prince of the land, means they're local people. So there are many guidelines. Doesn't mean Malaysian, but Malaysian Malays. So there are many guidelines that you need to think about. And then you have Indonesia, for example. Indonesia, a lot of businesses, we have a few big families that are involved in all these businesses. So, and a lot of things you may not be so sure about, whether you need to give certain kind of money, right, to get things done, and there's a rate for certain money. So it's actually very open. It's very open. So, who do you give to, when do you give, how much, no more, no less. So there's a lot more complication like that. So again, maybe a local joint venture partner as well. And of course, you have Vietnam. It has its own different, again, different culture. And, in Vietnam, would it be in Ho Chi Minh? Would it be in Hanoi? Something to think about. And okay, you always check, politically what has been happening in that country in the last 2 years. And of course, Thailand is a different thing by itself, right? So Thailand also quite a big market, but again, a few big companies have dominated as well. So whatever you plan to offer, you must think, is it something that's unique that you can bring to the table, or is there competition already? Can you compete with the other players who are in it? So that's one thing. China is even more opaque because of the very unique culture that the Chinese is, where a lot of things are not said directly like that, but it's said after or before. So China in itself, whether you do north of China, south of China, east, right, west, they're all very, very different. So these are, again, China will be something that maybe will be even harder than Southeast Asia, I would think, right? And of course, USA, USA, I think is more transparent as well. But I think cost of labor, you got to consider the cost of labor, and again, more policy changes now, something to think about. So policy change is always a big thing for you in all these countries, right? But however, in Singapore, policy change is not so bad. It's the least volatile of them all. And also in the business that you are in, do you have to hire local people? What are the requirements for you? Right? These are all the considerations that will come in at the same time. Are you going to make use of technology and AI to make yourself more efficient? The taxes you have to pay, right? So all these you will need some consultants, but most importantly, take a look at your own business first to see, is there a need in those particular countries? So these are things you can consider, but I think these are markets you can definitely consider, whatever business you are in, no harm. In fact, a lot of Chinese are now coming into Southeast Asia, and they're getting a sense of things already. So this is not a bad space to come into as well.
Супер, спасибо большое. Еще есть вопрос про стандарты управления межнациональными компаниями, которые функционируют на разных континентах. Какие есть отличия в структуре и в правилах управления? Именно как удерживать вот эти масштабы в эффективности?
Yeah, so I think with time, especially with multinational companies, there are higher and higher standards compared to before. Harder and harder, and a lot more resources that need to be spent on the ESG I spoke about. So a lot of expectation now. So you want to dwell and manage a multinational company, you must be prepared for the cost, which is higher and higher. So even if you're not listed, if you're listed, there's even more requirements. But even if you're not listed, there'll be a lot of requirements of you. So I think, first of all, investors will be expecting a very transparent kind of company, right? And there'll be a lot of requirements in different parts of the world at different times, getting you to be very environmentally friendly. So whatever business you are in, the amount of waste, it should be reduced. They want you to use recyclable things. You can see already in Starbucks, some have no more straws, some are using disposable straws. They all cost more, right? All that they will expect of you. In many countries now, even plastic bags, people need to pay for it, different things. So that itself, the environmental part will be more and more expensive, I can imagine. And then, and of course, the whole recycling story, solar panel and, stuff like that. They want to see that story with you. The social part is more straightforward. It's about helping people with disability, helping the more needy people. That's a nice thing to do anyway. You want to do it, I'm sure. So that's okay to have that. And also, they want more diversity in your recruitment of people, right? Gender diversity, people who are differently abled. That's something they like to see as well, from all kinds of background. So there'll be more and more expectation of multinational companies coming in. Even in your social media messaging or in your marketing messaging, you want to be careful about what you say and don't say, because sometimes we know some big companies have made mistakes as well, so you must be quick enough to, when people complain, withdraw it. Because always remember, social media is a very big thing. I'm not sure which are the most popular social media platform in Kazakhstan you guys are on. I suspect it's Instagram and TikTok. So same thing, people are on all these online platform. They can say things about you so fast, right? Facebook and everything else. So that is the key thing. And of course, you want to spend money on compliance, consulting lawyers if you're not sure, because you can't just do something if you are half sure or 80% sure. You want to be 100% sure. So your costs will go up. So environmental is one thing. And of course, your costs will now go up, right? And then you want to use good companies for all your audits and everything else, internal audit, external audit, for tax. So all these, more consultants, is again money. Professionals make a lot of money, I tell you. Maybe you should become a professional company. That comes in as well. And of course, taking care of people now. Mental wellness is a big thing. So it's not just about coming to work. You want to make them happy, take care of them, right? So the whole thing becomes a lot harder to run a business than before or at the moment. So the structures will be similar for most multinational companies, I would think, but I would say that for everybody, it's going to get harder and harder and harder and more cost for you to go in. So if you want to, so it's something for you to really, really think about as well.
Супер, спасибо большое, Излин. Дорогие друзья, сейчас я предлагаю вам подумать, если у вас есть амбиции по международной экспансии вашей компании, вы, пожалуйста, пропишите в чате, в какую страну вы хотели бы зайти, какие следующие рынки вы видите для своей компании. Ну и в целом, если есть какие-то вопросы к Излин, хотите получить от нее совет, тоже напишите. Я сейчас возьму слово, минут 7 займу у вас, презентую MBA-программу, потому что я вижу у нас в чате там разрываются по вопросам, как к нам присоединиться. Сейчас я все расскажу. И дальше мы пообщаемся еще по вопросам на большой блок лидерства, ну и сделаем, соответственно, разборы ваших ситуаций. Наверное, уже доску почета нам некогда с вами разбирать кейсы, скину чуть позже. Хочу пригласить вас в бизнес-экосистему ЯСА. Кто не знает, у нас не так давно случились изменения. К нам в соучредители зашел Жан Карсыбаев и Адиль Нургожин, в том числе это сооснователи венчурного фонда Big Sky Capital. Жан закончил тоже Гарвард, много управлял компаниями с Fortune 500. Адиль тоже стоял у истоков создания в целом инвестиционного рынка в Казахстане. Он очень сильный инвестор, проинвестировал в самые сильные стартапы Казахстана, такие как Церебра, Клокстер, Чоколайф и так далее. В общем, ребята нас сейчас сильно поддерживают своим нетворком. Вот в том числе Излин у нас как спикер появилась благодаря им. Она является limited partner in Big Sky. И сейчас мы с ней тоже тесно очень дружим. Наш совет директоров, президент ассоциации выпускников Гарварда, мировой ассоциации. Соответственно, мы тоже благодаря Реджине имеем доступ к сообществу, наверное, лучших бизнес-умов этого мира и имеем возможность их привлекать к нам как спикеров. Вот, например, не так давно у нас выступал Джереми Стрикленд, он директор по маркетингу Amazon Go, он тоже представитель этого сообщества, и Кавана Кинка на Senior Counsel в американском Гугле. Что такое бизнес-экосистема ESI Education? Это сильное, высокоэффективное бизнес-образование. Мы делаем упор исключительно на практику, на воркшопы, на кейс-стадии. Здесь мы, кстати, очень много переняли из гарвардского опыта, поскольку тесно сотрудничаем с людьми, которые закончили этот университет, величайший в этом мире. Делаем большой упор на нетворкинг-активности, на взаимодействие и модерацию взаимодействия наших участников друг с другом, развиваем наше сообщество, делаем большой упор на бизнес-трекинг для того, чтобы не просто наши студенты пришли, послушали лекции и ушли, получив диплом. У нас трекеры ведут наших студентов ежемесячно относительно их стратегии, их компании. У каждого свой индивидуальный путь, свои индивидуальные траектории развития. И благодаря трекингу у нас это возможно. Плюс также по каждой из дисциплин ключевых, например, по финансам, по продажам, по маркетингу наши преподаватели тоже делают трекинг по истечении месяца после прохождения воркшопа для того, чтобы вы внедрили действительно все, что вам дано домашними заданиями, сделали, потом получили обратную связь, поштурмили и так далее. Также мы летаем в разные страны, делаем вам международный нетворк, соединяем вас с CEO, с основателями зарубежных компаний для того, чтобы быстрее случался обмен опытом, какие-то межнациональные сотрудничества и так далее. Вот из ближайших, куда я вас сегодня приглашу, и на следующей неделе мы будем с Адилем Нургожиным делать вебинар. Мы летим в Малайзию в конце августа, с 23 августа, и в ноябре у нас ожидается США. Также у нас есть теперь дружественный инвестиционный фонд, ну и как бы у нас теперь, как у немногих в Казахстане, есть понятные инструменты привлечения инвестиций, то есть наши партнеры, они институциональные инвесторы, которые профессионально этим занимаются, они всегда находятся в поиске интересных проектов и всегда находятся в поиске, соответственно, привлечения денег для своего фонда. поэтому питч-сессии регулярные перед ними. Вот следующая питч-сессия у нас будет в Боровом. Мы поедем в Боровое 19-20 июля. Все, кто к нам поступит, соответственно, вы тоже туда попадаете. Остановимся в Уиндоме, отдохнем, там неформальное общение, взаимодействие с отдельным Жаном, соответственно. Ну и швейцарский диплом Executive MBA от Swiss Institute of Tech and Entrepreneurship. Для тех, у кого не закрыт гештальт по MBA-программе, мы даем вам такую возможность. В конце вам нужно будет сдать часть экзаменов, перед швейцарскими профессорами защититься, и будет у вас, соответственно, диплом. Потом пройдете процедуру нострификации и можете работать, укреплять свое портфолио и так далее. Вот буквально сейчас Алина мне написала, мой партнер, сказала, что этот институт прошел еще одну дополнительную аккредитацию британскую, то есть диплом еще ценнее стал. У нас и так был ряд аккредитаций EduQua, членство в Симоне и так далее. Вот сейчас у нас есть еще и британская аккредитация, что супер круто, я считаю. Бизнес-образование, дисциплины, список вы видите. Детально останавливаться не буду. Наши спикеры, мы стараемся отбирать бриллианты бизнес-сообщества Казахстана, и сейчас, как вы можете увидеть, мирового бизнес-сообщества. Люди, которые имеют от 20 лет опыта в своем деле, действительно имеют кросс-культурную насмотренность, при этом имеют фундаментальное образование. Декан Стэнфордского университета у нас не так давно выступал, директор по маркетингу Амазона. Вот буквально пару дней назад у нас был один из топов банков Нью-Йорк, Излин тоже наш бриллиант. И очень много представителей казахстанского бизнеса в том числе. Все это я детально еще скину, чтобы вы могли ознакомиться в чате. Работаем в гибридном формате. У нас есть часть отписана в онлайне, для того, чтобы вам было удобно посмотреть уроки в комфортные промежутки времени, если что, передать своим ассистентам на отсмотр и на внедрение сразу же. И 70% мы работаем в офлайне. В Астане у нас офис в Талант Towers. Ежемесячно воркшопы двухдневные, где вы прям работаете со спикером, внедряете, считаете, оцифровываете и так далее. Также ежемесячно трекинг, ежемесячно различные практикумы, бранчи, короткие какие-то мероприятия для обмена опытом, для знакомств. Раз в квартал мы делаем нетворкинг-сессии. Не так давно, 10 июня у нас прошла нетворк-сессия в Мэриоте в Астане. Супер успешная, я считаю. Была и такая, она жестко структурированная, модерированная мной, где четко по 30 секунд у каждого есть слово, каждый представляется, говорит свой запрос, потом каждый говорит, чем он может друг другу быть полезен, и благодаря этому ты имеешь 10 плюс целевых контактов для себя от лучших представителей бизнеса Казахстана. И потом, естественно, закуски, шампанское и так далее, полезные лекции от AI-разработчика из Флориды. В общем, мы стараемся вас развивать как бизнес-лидеров комплексно со всех сторон, чтобы вы и друзей себе находили, и нетворкинг делаем не некомфортным, как это обычно происходит. Это обычно мы приходим на форумы, никого не знаем, и как бы нетворкинг, не нетворкинг. Ты же не подойдешь к незнакомому человеку, не спросишь сразу, слышь, дай контакт мне того-то человека. А мы, соответственно, берем на себя этот айсбрейк, помогаем вам быстрее решать вопросы. И лучшая экспертиза, мне кажется, одна из лучших на рынке Казахстана уж точно, скорее всего, и Центральной Азии. Наш проект в целом уникален. Такого формата я не видела не в России, хотя имею большой опыт работы в России, не в Казахстане, не в Узбекистане. Соответственно, я очень горжусь тем, что мы делаем. Мы этим живем ежедневно, ежечасно, 24/7. Вся наша команда работает для того, чтобы вы, как бизнес-лидеры, развивались, чтобы ваши бизнесы вместе с нами росли. Здесь небольшой фотоотчет с наших мероприятий, трекерство, диплом я уже проговорила. Мы летаем в путешествие. Вот здесь можете видеть фотографии с Таиланда. Помимо того, что у нас там с утра до вечера были бизнес-встречи, мы еще и с монахом успели помедитировать, и различные культурные здания посмотреть. Вот в Японию не так давно мы летали. Делаем всегда встречи под запросы наших студентов. Например, у нас всегда с нами летает Рустем, у него стартап американский в сфере солнечной энергетики. Вот, соответственно, в Испании он встречался с ассоциацией солнечной энергетики. А в Японии он тоже встречался с рядом стартапов, которые развивают солнечную энергетику. В Таиланде он встречался с компанией Банпу, с генеральным директором. Это аналог нашего Казмунайгаза. Там и традиционная энергетика, и альтернативная есть. В общем, у Рустема у нас всегда такая насмотренность прокачивается благодаря нашим связям. Для Айбека мы делали встречу с компанией Кумон, например, в Японии. У него была задача завести их франшизу на Центральную Азию. Вот мы пытались эти контакты наладить. У нас есть еще студентка Данара. У нее был запрос по сервисам автоматизации отельной сферы, именно 3-звездочных отелей. Вот, соответственно, в Таиланде мы делали ряд встреч со стартапами, которые этим занимаются. То есть мы всегда стараемся быть результативными. Ну и про Китай я тоже часто говорю. Вот сейчас мы 2-й раз летим в Китай в конце июня. Там мы работаем над экспортом зерновых, над экспортом мясо-молочной продукции, работаем над путями привлечения инвестиций от китайцев, ну и, соответственно, над обменом опытом, инновациями. Вот сейчас у нас тур чисто нацелен на искусственный интеллект, big data, автоматизацию в сельскохозяйственной сфере. Соответственно, вчера мы только созванивались с Адилем и с Афик, это человек, который нам помогает с организацией малайзийского бизнес-тура, продумывали, что акцент будет в этот раз на тег, посетим educational компании, real estate компании, в хорике компании посетим, ну, естественно, различные IT-компании посетим, посмотрим опыт внедрения искусственного интеллекта в Малайзии. Будет организована питч-сессия, если это для вас актуально, если стоит вопрос привлечения инвестиций, Адиль выслушает, подскажет, даст обратную связь по структурированию вашего проекта, привлечет он еще своих дружественных инвесторов, то есть у вас полноценная будет возможность пропичить проекты, ну и возможность сделать первичные договоренности по привлечению денег, ну либо получить обратную связь от сильнейших инвесторов этого мира. Здесь резюме. Какие дисциплины учим, как мы учим, какие форматы обучающие у нас внедрены ежемесячно. Раз в 2 месяца у нас питч-сессии будут проходить здесь, в Казахстане, перед Жаном с Адилем. Дипломы, коучи, 1 год. Мы с вами учимся. Стоимость 4 миллиона 100. В подарок вам сейчас включена выезд в Боровое 19-20 июля. Там будет Адиль и Жан. Соответственно, они расскажут про свой опыт инвестирования, прослушают ваши проекты, поговорим о многомиллионных сделках, ну и неформальный отдых, нетворкинг, знакомства. У нас будет порядка 35 предпринимателей там собрано. В конце августа мы с вами летим в Малайзию. И сообщество «Я сам Membership» — это вот эти все короткие мероприятия, нетворкинг-сессии, это вам все идет в подарок. Ранее мы еще там в чате писали, включали США в подарок, но сейчас, к сожалению, все, этот оффер уже закончился, он действовал только для тех, кто к нам до конца мая присоединялся. По вопросам можете написать в чате, здесь есть QR-код, обязательно оставляйте заявку на собеседование, наши координаторы с вами свяжутся, подскажут, помогут. Если вдруг вы нам не подходите или мы вам не можем помочь, мы вам так прямо и скажем, потому что для меня очень важна репутация, и если я вижу, что никак мы не мэчимся, возможно, по ценностям мы с вами не сходимся, или у вас ожидания не соответствуют тому, что мы можем дать, то мы вам откажем. Потому что нам нужно, чтобы мы с вами в первую очередь как люди, как личности друг друга понимали и чувствовали. Ну все по организационным моментам. Да, это то, что нужно. Давайте сейчас ссылку продублируем, и вы тогда записываетесь на собеседование, если вы почувствовали, что вы хотите быть с нами, хотите вместе с нами развиваться. Welcome. Давайте пообщаемся. Вдвоем зайти в одну группу можно, следующая группа стартанет в сентябре, либо вы можете присоединиться к той группе, которая стартанула в июне. Там вы сильно ничего не пропустите, если готовы учиться прямо сейчас. Но в любом случае мы с вами и в Малайзию летим, и в Боровое едем. Тут единственное, сверху у вас будут travel-расходы, потому что мы не туристическая компания, поэтому мы полностью на себя берем организацию программ, встреч, трансферов между локациями и так далее. Пишите вопросы, буду периодически отвечать. А пока давайте продолжим общаться с Излин. Теперь немного поговорим про лидершип. Вопрос такой. Когда компания набирает бешеный рост или какие-то изменения случаются, трансформации. Как удержать команду? Потому что, ну, команда не всегда бывает гибка в своих мыслях, так скажем. Вот как вы управляете изменениями, Изли?
Sure. First of all, when you are doing big changes, you must be prepared that unfortunately some people may leave. So as a leader, you must be prepared for that. So to share from my Far East organization days, there were some very big changes we were making. So in the past, in service apartments in Singapore, usually an apartment we rent out, people stay for 2 years usually. But a new rule allowed us to rent it out for just 7 days. So can you imagine? So in the past, you have 1 or 2 check-in, check-outs a month, and now suddenly every day you have 10, 12 check-in and check-outs. That's very scary. So when I took on the job with Far East organization, the group had already decided to convert long stay to short stays. That's how you improve your revenue. So with that, the team were in big shock because you don't have to clean so much, and now you have to keep turning around, clean the apartment, vacuum, paint, every time a checkout is out before the new check-in comes in. So that was very difficult. And unfortunately, some people had to leave because they decided to leave. Some of them said, look, I chose to join a service apartment instead of a hotel because the pace is slow. But now the pace is fast again. I meant to retire, but now I can't. So there were some people who left on very good terms. So they said, sorry, this is not for me. So that happens. But for those who leave behind, what do you do? How do you help them? So we try to put in a lot of things like even though we could not just increase the number of headcount that we have, but we spend money on expensive and efficient machinery. Right? So for example, can we buy more expensive? Like for example, if someone has checked out, you want to paint the place, right? And turn around the place. But you want to do it fast because the next check-in is coming in. So what do?
Нет,
Maybe you
не
spend
надо
more
ему.
money on very expensive paint that smells less. Right? So things like that. So you have to put in something to keep the team in place because if nothing changes, it'll be very tough for them, right? And also if they do a good job, we reward them on the spot, right? We will do spot checks on certain apartments. And if it's 100% clean and perfect, bulbs all working, nothing to, catch them for, we will give a reward. Things like that. So we, there will be times that you have to do transformation, but just always be prepared that some people will leave. It's okay, don't force them to stay because the new company, the new style may not be what they want. That's okay, but you stay friends. But for those who stay,
Вы
you must be fair to
там
them. You can't push them with the same kind of machinery, right? So sometimes it means maybe you pay them a little bit more, maybe yes, maybe no, but you put in certain incentive structure that if you hit a certain incentive, you get some bonus, for example. So this is what you have to do. It's very difficult journey. It's very difficult, but you got to do it slowly. And like I said, in the process, please take care of your own health and on your own mental being first. Only if you've taken care of yourself can you lead the team even better.
Да.
Спасибо большое. Так, Арсен, что-то у вас происходит с микрофоном. Давайте контролировать этот момент. Излин, я бы хотела поговорить про лидерство по-женски, про вот инструменты тихой силы, как быть авторитетом, как влиять, как вести с собой, но без такого жесткого директивного давления. Какие у вас есть советы по этому поводу?
Sure. So it's a very fine balance. So I think most importantly, in a lot of things, to influence means you walk the talk. For example, if we say we start work at 9:30 and we want them to come on time, you come on time. I mean, that is the most obvious thing. Without having to say anything, if they notice that you're always on time, somehow they will be on time. So that's one example for one thing, for example. And also by getting them to understand by doing a certain thing will lead to better results. That happens as well. But I must admit, as a leader, sometimes there will be some decisions that are made by your staff that is, in the end, you look back and it's not the right decision. This happens, but that's okay. Sometimes we support them because that's all about empowerment. It's okay to say, if I can live my life again, we will not do that. But we learn, we laugh about it sometimes, but it's okay to make your point clear that we regret that action. But more importantly, we learn from that mistake. From now on, we don't make the same mistake. So things like that, I think people will want to learn and want to, work together, because sometimes, especially now, we are leading adults, right, in our work. So by influencing something, if someone believes in something, they give in more than if you force them to come up with something. So it's not an easy thing, and all of us have different styles, all of us. So sometimes I have my harsh style as well. Sometimes call for it. So at different times, you will leave it to yourself what you think is right. But one thing I will always want to say is to use your gut feel. Use your gut feel, your gut feeling. That is the one that if you think, I don't have a good feeling, then don't do something. Or you think it's a good feeling, you do it. Because quite often the gut is not just the gut. The gut is actually a combination of your past experience and your current wisdom put together. That gives you the gut feel. That's why quite often you are right. Yeah. So go for that.
Супер. Еще такой вопрос, связанный с, наверное, психологической устойчивостью, поскольку сейчас в целом время турбулентное, и вы как CEO сталкиваетесь с большим уровнем напряжения. Как вы вот эту психологическую устойчивость сохраняете, оставаясь опорой для всей своей команды, для акционеров и так далее? Какие советы? Как не сойти с ума?
It's not easy. Yes. So I think most importantly is because sometimes we can have 4 or 5 big issues on hand that is not resolved, and we're trying to manage it at the same time. It's always like that. When things happen, it's all at the same time. So I think some of the key things would be, obviously, you want to have a plan first, which one to tackle, or maybe at the same time. So you must have a kind of a timetable. So that's why every night my notes to myself, my plan is very important. The next day I know by each hour what am I doing. So you have that. And secondly, one thing that always helps is no matter how big the issue is, you cut it up into bite size. So step 1, step 2, step 3. So once you at least solve 5% of the 100%, that is a step forward already, right? So you have a strategy and a plan, and then you have the different steps to execute. And of course, it does help when you have recruited strong staff people, your deputy, who can brainstorm with you on certain things, right? Make full use of the team that you have, because they could be the ones who sometimes come up with the answer. Sometimes some of the answers that staff can come up with will sound ridiculous. I never laugh because that could be the right answer. Sometimes it's so crazy, but I allow crazy ideas because that could be the one that may work out. So nobody is shy to come up with answer. Let everyone come up with crazy ideas, And I think sometimes it's okay, or every time it's okay to laugh at the issues, to have a sense of humor in the workplace, to laugh at the whole thing, because it's a stress relief. And also by laughing, you come with different solution. And one thing I do is I always have a flip chart. I always like to have whiteboards and flip charts in my office, because quite often with problem solving, you want to draw things out. Because sometimes you say something, they think a different thing. So I write out, these are the solution, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3 is good, 5 is no good. You write that. So I do that every day in my office with my team. And because it's visual and it's clear, it brings you to the same direction. So even as we speak, I have many unresolved issues now at my workplace, which I need to overcome one by one, but I'm doing it one by one. And the other thing is, do not be shy to make use of professionals or people who may have done such things before to talk to them, right? Or bankers or whatever, depending on who you work with, or maybe a mentor, could be similar or different industry, to get some ideas. That's how you deal with things. And like I said, always enjoy yourself. Weekend, I know sometimes some of you may work over weekends, but try to do things that really de-stress you, to enjoy. Girls, if you want to go shopping, just buy things, whether in the physical shops or online. Just do it, because you will feel better. When you feel better, you will be even sharper at your workplace as well.
Супер, спасибо большое, Излин. Дорогие друзья, у нас еще с вами 10 минут свободного общения. Пишите в чате активно вопросы, а я пока задам вопрос от Даны. Излин, были ли в вашей карьере препятствия, связанные с гендерной принадлежностью, и как вы их решали?
So yes, I definitely had. So definitely the first time with Singapore Airlines, before me, all the station managers who were airport managers that Singapore Airlines sent overseas to run their airport operations, all were men in the past. So when the opportunity came out for me to give it a try, so I was the guinea pig. That's why I was the only person in my batch, in that sense. I was the first girl. There was already a lot of bias. People were hoping I would make mistakes so that in future they don't have to deal with female station managers, you know. So it was tough. I was given a mentor who was a guy. So he used to call me up, you know, and say, look, you know, the reports you did, make sure there's no mistake. You must work 3 times harder because they're looking out for mistakes. Don't make mistakes. Don't make mistakes. So I had it in me not to make any mistakes. And so that was very tough. And at the same time, when I was sent to Frankfurt, I was sent to Frankfurt as an assistant station manager first. So it's a lot, so you don't have a car. As an assistant, there's no car. So I used to live near the main train station of Frankfurt, and I had to get to work at the airport quite often by 5 a.m. in the morning, 5 a.m. in the morning, because the flight was arriving very early, and with very strong tailwind, sometimes they arrive at 4:30 in the morning. So I had to find my way. And, you know, and sometimes I just had to walk. It's a short distance, but I had to walk to the main train station where you have drug addicts with the needles all over the floor and blood. I got to say, you know, in German, excuse me, so I can go down to the train platform. Those were so tough. And I was so careful because I didn't want anything to happen to me as a girl. So then they would say, you see, girls cannot go overseas, you know. So I had a lot of gender bias, but I worked hard. I worked very hard, and every opportunity given to me, I made full use of that. And the scheme became a success, and they said girls are okay. And until today, you see girls station managers for Singapore Airlines. It wasn't easy. I had to be so careful because of so many factors I got to think about. But that can be done. You just have to keep pushing on. You know, it got to, unfortunately, I presume the one who's asking me the question is a girl. Sometimes you must work harder, 2 to 3 times harder than the usual guy. Unfortunately, but that's what it is. But then later the results will show for themselves.
Спасибо большое, Излин, за такой исчерпывающий ответ. Я вижу здесь вопросы по MBA. Все, кто номер оставил, с вами координаторы свяжутся. А также есть ссылочки, вы можете там оставить заявку, и, соответственно, с вами тоже сегодня свяжутся, пригласят на собеседование. Контракты можно будет подписать сегодня. Оффер по Малайзии действует у нас до конца этой недели. Так, вопрос по опыту, связанному с авиацией. С учетом опыта работы в управлении аэропортами, как вы видите перспективу строительства и развития на границе Казахстана и Китая на территории свободной экономической зоны Хоргос-Восточные ворота, крупного международного грузопассажирского аэропорта Аэротрополиса. Какие слова.
Oh, this is interesting. While I don't know the specific area you mentioned, but one thing from my experience with airport operations is that obviously you study first, which are first of all, you want to take a look, is your train setup already very sophisticated between, those two countries, right? That's one. But air travel is definitely very much preferred by people as well because it is faster. So that is one possibility. And of course, assuming that you feel that that makes sense, then obviously it would be something that can be considered. Whether would it be a joint venture with the Chinese, right? Because the Chinese are now beginning to also manufacture their planes and different things, and they're very good at airport management as well. That's one possibility. One of the newer, now that you mentioned airports, one of the very newer airports I've visited in China is the Beijing Daxing Airport. Beijing Daxing Airport, Daxing. It's very modern. They've done it very, very well. So that is one possibility. And also with the whole Belt and Road scheme, because I do fly to China every now and then, China takes a Belt and Road scheme, BRI, very seriously. So that is one potential. Of course, you want to do a study first and looking at the passenger on both sides. I did understand from a deal the other day that many Chinese are also in Kazakhstan, actually, working in their businesses and all that. So I think a lot of things is happening between both countries. So that is something that you definitely can consider. So obviously, and again, with the whole ESG thing, just to make sure that the airport is not located again, so too close to residential. These are some things to think about. And if it's special economic zone, it then means that you have a lot more tax incentive. That's good. And of course, by building an airport, where you have a lot of flights coming in and departing, you're also increasing employment because airport and the airline industry is one that hires a lot of people. So that is a very good thing for the government. The government will like it, right? And of course, the air travel, the rights between both countries, which cities they can fly to and all that, these are things to be taken into consideration. And you also want to consider, if you do that, you also want to consider, do you want to have another wing or terminal for private jets? So maybe private jets is something to think about as part of your old, international terminal as well. Of course, you have international and domestic terminal and private jets, something to think about to integrate everything in there. I think it sounds like a very exciting idea you have, and you must have thought about it to feel that potentially that will come in. I mean, look, Singapore Airlines, again, for the last 2 years have been having record profit, right? Even though during COVID, they earned nothing. People had no jobs to go to, but now, wow. So it shows that air travel is still there. And even though you have a lot of trains, high-speed rail, that's fantastic, there are still many people who may want to travel on airlines as well. So I think that's very interesting idea. For me, I will never say no to aviation and airline. So something that you can definitely look into, but think of the different factors. And if you do go in it, make sure it's a good one and have enough runways or adding runways in future in case there's more space. So get a bigger space and add more terminals. Like Singapore Airlines now, they're adding Terminal 5. And Terminal 5 is the volume of Terminal 1, 2, 3, and 4 combined. That's crazy. So because air travel is there and is here to stay as well. Yeah, this is a very good question. Very interesting. And I wish you all the best if that's done.
Супер. Спасибо большое. Так, вижу еще. Все, поблагодарили. Дорогие друзья, если есть вопрос, можно задать последний. Либо если нет, то давайте Излин поблагодарим. Very insightful. Thank you. Напишите вашу обратную связь. Как вам эта встреча? Если нет вопросов, Излин будет очень приятно почитать. Она сегодня специально для вас выделила эти 1,5 часа для того, чтобы с вами познакомиться, передать свой опыт бесценный. Огромное спасибо. Излин, вас тут благодарят. Говорят, что было очень впечатляюще.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed it and good questions as well. Thank you.
Говорят, Излин, вы вдохновляете, что у вас очень интересный опыт. Благодарят за мотивацию, которую вы им подарили. Супер. Спасибо вам большое, дорогие друзья. Мы будем благодарны, если вы отметите нас в соцсетях, отметите ESI Education. Это очень важно, немножечко подкрепляет нашу внутреннюю веру, что мы делаем все правильно. Напомните условия Татьяны, вы так хотите активно поступить. Это очень похвально. Смотрите, вам нужно оставить заявку на собеседование. Наши координаторы с вами сегодня свяжутся и помогут вам заключить контракт, подскажут вообще, подходит вам под ваш запрос программы или не подходит. Ну и в целом со всеми бонусами помогут там и так далее. Оффер по Малайзии у нас действует до конца недели. То есть сейчас до конца недели, если мы с вами оформляемся, то в августе сразу мы вас берем в оформление билетов на Малайзию, в Боровое мы с вами едем и так далее. Благодарю за полезную информацию, за то, что искренне делитесь вашим опытом. Все, всем спасибо. Ну что, мы будем с вами тогда прощаться. Я желаю всем продуктивного рабочего дня. Сейчас он в самом разгаре. Излин, спасибо большое. Я так рада с вами познакомиться. Спасибо, что мы с вами сотрудничаем. Желаю вам всего хорошего. До свидания. Так, ну что, можем отключаться тогда потихоньку.